Hello, Rachel.
Hello, Ryan.
How are you doing?
Pretty good.
What was that?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. I'm also here to say that I am doing fairly well. Not pretty good.
Okay.
Just fairly well.
Okay.
What was that? Okay, yeah. I'm okay as well. We're all okay here. But you know what I have, Rachel? I have passion.
Mm-hmm.
I have love, and I have a big corporation.
You have a fire.
I have a fire, and a wheel of it. Rachel, my big corporation is Yum Yum Industries.
Yes.
Where we dispense Yum Yum energy to all the boys, girls, and men, women, and children, and others, and aliens, and plants, and minerals.
Are we one of the biggest corporations on Mars as well?
Let me check. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are. We're also the only Australian Babylon 5 podcast in all of existence, which has got to count for something. Just one thing it's got to count for.
We might also be one of the biggest Babylon 5 podcasts on Patreon.
Oh, I don't know if I could be that strong, but we do have a Patreon that we are uploading lots of cool content to these days, including our discussions of The Expanse. We're going through the Star Wars movies. We have talked about The Sopranos recently, so that's been fun. But here's the real, this is the be-all and end-all. Star Trek Discovery was a series we covered. Isn't that correct, Rachel?
Unfortunately.
You can verify that we covered that, yes?
Yes.
And we will cover the final season.
Unfortunately.
Which the plot synopsis, unironically, no jokes aside, is about David Cronenberg. Yes, famous film director David Cronenberg is an actor in this show because he likes easy money.
Yeah.
He is assigning the Discovery crew the mission to find out how to solve an ancient alien Rubik's Cube, and they must do it before the galaxy ends, and I can't wait for that season. But why all of this talk about Star Trek Discovery? We've watched it, we've covered it, but what else about it is so important?
The specific yum yum moment, which was random and horny and confusing and exciting.
It was all of those things, and we name ourselves after that moment in which a character said yum yum completely off the cuff. But we are going to have someone else here for the podcast today. We're not just talking about Babylon 5 and yum yum alone. No. We have someone who's been a recurring nemesis to this podcast.
I was a guest on this episode on somebody else's podcast, so it feels right to have a guest for this episode.
That's right. Rachel went on our friends The Last Best Babylon 5 podcast to talk about the Wheel of Fire, but none of them are here today to talk about this one. No, it's recurring foe of the podcast, Julio from the Contrarians. Julio is back, and as one YouTube comment said in a Julio episode, they like having Julio around because he disagrees all the time. Julio, hello.
Okay, so I was trying to figure out why you'd pick this episode as what I'm assuming is going to be my final Babylon 5 appearance here on your show. And I guess if you just wanted to have somebody to argue against, then I understand. Because this episode features two of the things I like the least about season 5, which might be my favorite season. So this should be interesting.
It's the titular episode of the season, and these episodes are good to have guests on for.
I will reveal later on why Julio was chosen for this episode, and it will stun everyone here, including me. But Julio, could you tell us a bit... That's so stupid. Julio, could you tell us a little bit more about not only your podcast, but that yum yum moment from your perspective? You're someone who's seen Star Trek Discovery. How would you describe that scene, that moment, for someone who's completely unaware?
Okay, so completely honestly, Ryan, I don't think that we would still be talking about the yum yum moment if you guys hadn't immortalized it with this podcast.
Wait, are you telling me when Oscar-winning actress Michelle Yeoh, fun fact, she won an Oscar after doing Discovery. Literally, the project she did after Discovery won her an Oscar. Are you telling me that when she dies, they won't play that in her memoriam section? I doubt it.
Well, I mean, did she even get a reaction shot after the yum yum? I know she prompts the yum yum, but
that's
I don't know
important.
if
She well, there's whole talk about AI sausages.
I think that by the time that we got to Yum Yum at the end of season 2, there was so much silliness with the time travel and the reveals and all that stuff that it just felt like it was just par for the course. But the genius, I guess, of both of you is taking that moment and making it 100 times sillier by taking it out of context. Now
there's context.
It's taken on a life of its own, and I love it. It's great. I mean, it really encapsulates everything that you criticize about Star Trek Discovery, which I agree with. I would say 70% of the time. Yum Yum is indefensible. You can't explain it, and it's great. I think that I'm glad. I hope that your show, when you're done with Babylon 5, whatever comes next, will be Yum Yum something. But you can't lose the Yum Yum.
Well, yeah. We're doing Exploring the Expanse. We couldn't shove Yum Yum in the Expanse title as well. But don't worry. We have plenty of conversations about the horny side of the phrase Yum Yum in that. But Julio, you have a podcast of your own. So what do you do on that podcast? What has been happening during the year for you?
What did we do this year was where we, for better or for worse, we let our patrons pick up most of the roster of movies that we covered during the year. And it's been fun. What we do is we take a movie that's either really fresh or really rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, and we argue against that score. So we take a really fresh movie and we'll nitpick it. We'll be like Ryan and Rachel talking about an episode of Discovery. We'll just go to town on it and point everything that's wrong. And then we'll take a rotten movie, a movie that's rotten on the tomato meter, and we'll talk about it like it's an episode of Babylon 5 or an episode of Space Above and Beyond. We're just praising everything that's good about it. And then in the second half of the show, we tell you how we really feel. So it makes for a fun time. It's me and my friend Alex talking about movies and trying to be contrarians, like the name of the show.
Clearly, Julio hasn't listened to much of the Space Above and Beyond coverage because he would know that Rachel was not a big fan of Nathan West for a large chunk of it.
Okay, by the time she
screamed at it.
This show wraps up, I think that Rachel, much like me, had warmed up to him.
Yeah, it's called an arc.
Tell you, the next person who acts irrationally, I swear I'm going to shoot myself in the head.
Bastards!
Did she just?
She did.
I'll get the gun.
Well, we need to hear what the episode's about. Does Rachel? Do you have the description? I don't see it in your hands.
I can get it up, but you didn't tell me that it was me this episode.
Well, is it me this episode? I don't think so. Let me call up Bartek and see if he has the description on hand by any chance. Julio, you're all the way around the other side of the globe. You don't happen to have it, do you?
Let me pull out my Babylon 5 DVDs so I can read the description.
They're on Blu-ray now.
No, thankfully, I got an email from Yum Podcast with the description here. So, here we go. Episode 19, Wheel of Fire. G'Kar, Garibaldi, and Lita all confront their present problems and future hopes. Delenn and Sheridan share a mutual hope for the future when Delenn learns she's pregnant.
It's a lot to take in. And there's a lot of Yum Yum energy. Yum Yum energy, of course. Rachel, how would you best put it to the Yumlings who are, of course, our listeners? If you listen to the podcast, you're a Yumling.
Exciting. A little bit sexy, little bit weird, little bit out there. But most importantly, it brings a smile to your face.
Enough talking about yourself, but how would you describe Yum Yum energy? No, you're completely correct. Yum Yum energy, and we like to talk about who could have said Yum Yum in this episode because it was such a far-out moment of discovery that we like to amuse ourselves by thinking who could have licked their lips in this particular episode of Babylon 5 and flick their hair back and say Yum Yum. And the obvious answer is Lita Alexander. It's clear as day. It's clear as night. It's clear as crystal. And I have to give it to her just because it is so obvious and she's so powerful.
I want you to narrow it down.
I know exactly the moment. Mm-hmm. It's right before she stands up when she's confronted by Lockley.
Before she says...
Before she refuses to be arrested, and before there's this expression on her face, and I've sent a picture of it to Julio recently. There's this expression on her face that Patricia Tallman gives of, bitch, die. And I love it. I love this. It's this smile, but the lips are almost in a frown. It's so sassy. And that's a moment where she could have quickly licked them and said yum yum as she got up. Ooh. But Rachel, do you have any people in this episode, or are you agreeing with the Lita?
Oh, it's Lita. My second is Jakar, but specifically Jakar eavesdropping.
Julio, you're the guest. This is your last time being able to pick a person from a Babylon 5 episode who could have said yum yum, so make it count.
I figured Lita was going to be the front runner, and I was tempted to say Lita, but towards the end when she reveals her red eyes to Garibaldi.
Mm-hmm.
But
pleased to meet you. Yum yum.
that would have worked.
Yeah, but let's shake it up a little and let's give it to Sheridan when he pulls the gun on Lita.
Yeah.
Gets the upper hand.
Can I give a dark horse contender Sheridan? Franklin
Sure.
too.
Yes,
Franklin.
Yes.
Franklin has just got this cocky walk to him this whole episode. He just keeps coming in and
Can
out
I
of
grab
scenes,
the
just
gun?
being like, "Yeah, give me. I better grab the gun. Oh boy!" Or when the guy's giving him the Jakar statue, and he's like, "Okay, I'll take it." He has such a spring in his step of like, "Yeah, I've done my overall acting in the show, and now I'm coasting." Woo! Not to say that Richard Biggs isn't giving it his best. He is, but there is just this devil-may-care attitude of the show's over for me.
Character has that energy of like, I'm out of here in a couple of months. Just gonna take
Weeks.
it cruisy.
I've got 2 more episodes left before I walk out unceremoniously without anyone noticing, and I'm going to bring back my awesome attire from the first episode I appeared in, the trench coat matched with a cool scarf. The Wheel of Fire, it is the name on the DVD cover, Rachel, and you said that you were on another podcast talking about this episode. So at least tell us right now what's so important about this episode? What's so special? What do you like about it? What's been your history and experience with it?
Well, it's another set of farewells, but not quite yet. Like, setting up more departures. I love the scenes with Garibaldi and Captain Lockley. They're just some of my favorite bits of acting in the whole show, to be honest. I love those bits. I love to let me pregnant. Sheridan's sweet reaction to it.
Well, at first he's flummoxed and he's like, I thought I couldn't be a daddy. I'm a wife guy. If I have to choose between a wife and a baby, I'm choosing my wife. Don't you know I've had 3 of them? 3 wives. How many kids, Rachel?
0.
0 until now.
Mm-hmm.
3rd time's a charm.
he had to mix species to get there.
I like the idea that he's only had sex 3 times and it's once with each wife.
Well, no, he seems to have fucked Ellen more than once. I think that was the secret to getting her pregnant.
Yes. Well, we know for a fact that Linnea listened to them explore pleasure centers.
Yeah. And he gave her an outfit.
That was a little too tight, yes. And
I felt a little bit too ridiculous for her.
And we know Jakar watched them have sex on the honeymoon.
Say, Jakar probably witnessed the beginning of the pregnancy.
That's true. Well, yeah, she's
if it's a honeymoon baby.
I enjoy this episode. I think it's very good. I like it overall. I don't
think it's my favorite of the titular episodes, though.
I like it more than No Surrender, No Retreat, which was the season 4 episode. What I really appreciate about this one is, although that there's this farewell sense to things, people are getting ready to say goodbye, there's just such a sadness at the center of this episode. Garibaldi, but also hope for something more. That DVD description really did sum up this episode quite nicely, because we see
Camus did good with that one.
Garibaldi get found out for his alcoholism, and it's not melodramatic, it's not big, it's not bombastic, it's just really sad. It's just really sad, but also it isn't hopeless. This isn't a hopeless episode. And I'm a big fan of Lita Alexander, and I love this moment for her in which she's finally standing up and saying, I'm not going to take it anymore. And I really enjoy that big set piece with her controlling everyone in the Zocalo, in the bar. Mm-hmm. That's all great stuff, but I think the Wheel of Fire captures the overall sense of what season 5 is, where we can have these big, exhilarating moments, but also there's just a quietness to this all as well. There's just a certain melancholy in the air, as well as a sense of things can be good in the future. There's just always a takeaway to the joys and to the sorrows.
Yeah, but it's not quite hopeful.
Yeah, it keeps fighting itself of like, we can be hopeful, but also this thing we can be happy about. It keeps doing all of that, and I enjoy that because that's what season 5 was doing in a nutshell. And here we have an episode that I think really gathers all of those components and plays with them within the 45 minutes.
It symbolizes season 5 very well, which is why it makes sense that it is the titular episode. But what do you think, Julio?
I think that there's this particular, on a rewatch, there's this particular pleasure in seeing everything kind of come together, just getting ready for the final batch of episodes and knowing how it all ends. You can appreciate, they set up all the pieces, and there's a just very special satisfaction on seeing a story that is allowed to come to its conclusion in a way that, at least to me, it doesn't feel rushed, right? It's there are things that we don't get to see, but the way that I felt like the way that this episode tied up so many loose ends and brought so many plot lines to a close, like, it was very elegant. And obviously, the first time I watched The Wheel of Fire, I was not able to appreciate that very well because I didn't know that we were tying things up. You know, when you see Lita and Garibaldi's arrangement, you don't know exactly, okay, so how does it play out over the next 3 or 4 episodes? Mm-hmm. And now that you do, like, you know, having finished the show, you know how it plays out. And it's like, oh, this is a pretty cool way of doing it. You know, they just kind of laid it out and then they didn't show you what happens next. So I felt that way. You know, the same thing, the Jakar and Lita arrangement, and then Sheridan and Delenn. Everything is very, I like it, elegant. You know, it just feels like they could have gone, like Ryan was saying, you know, you could have, not just with the Garibaldi plotline, but everything else could have been a little more bombastic. But it's, in a way, it's just a very quiet rearranging of the pieces just for the final stretch of episodes. I really liked it.
It is very amusing moments ago talking about the reasoning for bringing Julio on and what Julio laid out, and that wasn't at all why I wanted you here. I remember when we were discussing the season and it was wrapping up, that you pointed to the events of this episode and how it managed to, I guess, pay off things that you were not particularly fond of, or you did not have the fullest investment in, or maybe you would be able to appreciate on a rewatch. You are not a big, you weren't a big lover at times of Lita Alexander or Patricia Tolman's acting for her. You've talked about with me off mic and also a bit on the mic. Garibaldi's a character that you very much enjoy in the series, but we will get into your thoughts a bit more deeply about this stretch of his character. But when we were talking about it, I just remembered you being like, you know, Wheel of Fire, this episode, like, you have this great Lita scene with Sheridan in the bar, the Garibaldi stuff with Lockley. It was a real sensation of this episode managed to do what feels like can be one of the most like heavy burdens, which is it can conclude or wrap up or further things that you may not be a big fan of in a way where it can give you a finer appreciation for those things.
I think it's definitely. I mean, I haven't rewatched the whole series, but I feel like it's Patricia Tallman's and Lita's finest hour in a way. Just for me, for somebody who was not really vibing with the performance, he or she was hitting every note, and it was cool. I was glad to be able to not worry about it. But that was one of my trepidations revisiting the episode, because what I remember was that it was a Lita heavy episode. I was like, oh yeah, but I don't really like those. And then rewatching, I was like, oh no, but this is the one where she has that really cool confrontation with Sheridan. And yeah, no, it's a good one. The Garibaldi stuff, we'll get to it, but I'm more conflicted about it. I really like Garibaldi at the beginning of the show. And, they put him through the ringer in the last couple seasons. And while that is interesting, I think that it also took away a quality that he had that I really liked, which was the kind of like the everyman character. And now he's just this torture person. And I appreciate the what they do with the character, but it made me miss when he was. It's not that I need him to be carefree or that I need him to be quippy all the time, but he's no longer the everyman, and
he's the head of the CIA, basically. He's also going to be the head of a corporation. And also, he was a filthy cop. I don't know if you can say he was. Is there genuinely an everyman character in B5? Because this is a show about movers and shakers.
Yeah, but out of everybody, Garibaldi was always the one that was able to give you kind of like the ground level point of view, whether, tinted by his own beliefs, but
And then Zach took over, right?
Yes, yeah.
Then Zachy boy came in and said, I'm actually the everyman. I could join a fascist group because I just want some extra scratch.
Absolutely. Zach replaced Garibaldi once they started, literally on the show, he took his place. And then Garibaldi just became this... I can enjoy him up to a point, but yeah.
I'd rather have you yelling at me or angry. Anything but disappointed. I know I failed.
I didn't say I was disappointed in you because of your failure. I'm disappointed because I didn't pick up on this earlier. Disappointed because you felt that you couldn't come to me about this on your own.
Franklin, I guess, assumes that they already know that she's pregnant, because he's just like, she's pregnant. Like, get with the program here. What the fuck? like.
But he's the guy that told them that they can't.
Yeah, and Sheridan's just like, but you said, and he's just like, I was wrong.
I said I'm not too sure about it, so you can't catch me on this one. I'm still a good doctor.
And I'm not a person that's good at betting, so my bad. And it seems to be that Delenn is still unconscious in the room, so John finds out before she does.
Well, she wakes up and she gives him this look, and maybe this is just me being too much of a sentimental,
couldn't quite
but I
figure out what she was mouthing at him.
What I got the feeling of is she knew already. That's what I got the feeling of.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
In fact, I thought that Franklin was acting that way because he knew that Delenn knew.
Yeah.
Maybe they'd had a conversation before this, and Sheridan... I guess Franklin assumed that Sheridan also knew, and
that makes
that's
sense.
when he found out.
It's so strange, I guess, to transport ourselves back in time. When this episode came out, we were only children.
Yeah.
So, but Franklin and Sheridan have a very frank, honest conversation about whether or not to abort the child.
I adore that.
And they don't even make a big... It doesn't even feel like they're making a big deal out of it.
Facts. It's just... She matters more to me than this baby. It is just... I choose her. She's the most important thing. She's the most important person. If I can have both, I want both. But I will not sacrifice her in order to have a child.
It's the way that it's played and written, because I don't even think from my modern viewing standards, let alone when I watched this when I was younger, that them having just such an open, honest, frank, almost casual conversation about whether or not to keep a child around or not, whether to terminate the child. If Sheridan, our lead man, even wants to be a father, it's handled with such dignity and grace that I can't even recognize it as if it's the show making any social statement about this thing. It just feels like this is a conversation that happens.
Sheridan making a choice about this pregnancy and his relationship with Delenn. It doesn't feel like it's a reflection of anybody else's choice. It's his choice.
And with shows like this, whether it is Star Trek, whether it is Quantum Leap or Battlestar Galactica, when they have to hit upon some social issues like this that were very contentious when they came out, or maybe still are, sometimes there is that heavy hand of like, see, we're making it normal. We're normalizing. Aren't we ever so cool? But I don't get any of that from this. It just feels like what the writing would take you to. If Sheridan and Delenn had a kid, there would most likely be a series of complications that would probably arise, and the doctor, who is their friend, would raise these to them, and they would have to think about it. The thing that always has confused me is we know that he remembers those flash forwards. We know he knows, like, he remembers them. And we already discussed on the podcast why didn't he realize the Shadow Minions were around Centauri Prime. But the real stumping one is here, where he didn't even know Delenn could get pregnant. He didn't even know that they could have a child. It's like, yes, you do. You know you do. Literally, one of the first things she says is, our son David is safe. And it's like, okay. And this was before you guys even kissed.
He was just being a little bit progressive and being like, maybe it's not biologically our kid.
Maybe it's one of Linnea's friends and we've adopted him. Yeah, I don't know. I find it a little bit of I find it a bit of a stretch, honestly. Like, I think if you give your character that, I think at times Sheridan can be a little too dumb, and the writing with moments like this just emphasize that. And it's not even like the writing is saying Sheridan is dumb. I just think Sheridan is dumb because why don't you remember this thing that I learned at the same time you did in the show? It's like, I know you're going to have a son because you know you're going to have a son. And then seasons later, it's like, Sheridan, you're going to have a kid. He's like, what? I didn't even know that was possible. Yes, you did. I know that because you know that. Like, it's just with a series that is really meticulous with all of these details. This has always been where it gets a little bit loosey-goosey for my tastes. It bothers me, is what I'm saying. It bothers me greatly.
Well, but maybe, and here's the easiest answer, Ryan. Maybe he just doesn't remember. Maybe he doesn't remember. He doesn't remember every single thing about the flash forwards. He just remembers some things. Yeah. It was a traumatic experience.
Yeah, but
it's literally the
just
first
convenience.
It's the first. Yeah, but like, it's the first.
He doesn't remember this thing.
It's the first thing he learned when he went to the flash forward. Was that he has a son.
He was still getting his bearings. He's like, what is a flash forward?
Yeah, exactly. It was during. Yeah, no.
You know what that sounds like, Julio? An excuse.
Coping.
Sounds like an excuse.
An explanation. Look,
it's called a headcanon, Ryan. Have you ever heard of one before?
There's a difference between an excuse and an explanation. You're trying to justify it.
Look. I cope by admitting that JMS isn't infallible, and that he's the same guy that wrote Dr. Doom crying about 9/11.
Yeah. He admitted that when he misattributed a quote to Sheridan with the Vonavar.
Yeah, when it was actually Sinclair's quote. There is something very interesting about the Wheel of Fire that I didn't have in my notes for the discussion, but I just want to highlight it, which is the thing that is the thread throughout all of the stories is Lockley. Lockley is engaged with most of these stories. She keeps coming in and out of them. She's leading them. There are people in the other stories coming up to her to ask her to help them. And I really like that for her. I really think that Lockley as a character, as well as Scoggins,
they're making her important.
They're making her important, but also the character really slots in nicely with that function where she's the spine of the episode in a lot of ways. They do push it at times, which is like in an unbelievable direction. The start is fucking absurd when Jakar is basically sucking her dick, being like, "You're my best friend." It's like, have you guys talked? When did you become friends? Well, why does she admire you so much? Yeah, give me
Does the scene work better? Does that scene work better if it's Ivanova instead of Lockley?
I guess, but even then, would you say Ivanova and Jakar had the best of relationships?
I mean, they had a history.
But that didn't answer my question.
I mean, they had a relationship. I think that Jakar is just happy to see a face that is not a Narn sucking up to him.
Yes, exactly it. And that's the whole point. There is a level of, in season 5, the awkwardness of telling us that Lockley is cool instead of just showing us, which this episode does a lot of, which is they show us that Lockley is cool. They don't need to tell us all the time. But the Narn are here, Rachel. What is happening with Jakar? He has returned from Centauri Prime, where he laments that Londo is the man that he feels the most pity for in the whole universe.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a really big moment for him as a character. And it is sort of overshadowed by, look at these wacky nuns worshipping Jakar.
We said Jakar was a scamp. Lockley is such a scamp during this scene. She plays it so, like, cool. She's just like, "Oh, no, just a few things going on. Oh, no, it's been totally fine. Oh, just a few." And then he sees the whole horde of them and she has this side-eye look of, "Yeah, I fucked you. Bye." And she just leaves. She just leaves him there.
I got a meeting, sauce.
Gives him a little salute and then does a hop and a skip and a jump out of the scene. Yes, Jakar has become an idol, much to his dismay. He has become a god for his people. He has become a beacon of a prophet. He's become a beacon of something. And we've seen him struggle with this during the last 2 seasons, that he has become aware of how things work, but he's not able to communicate that to his own people. He's actually been more effective at communicating it to fucking Londo Mollari, his arch nemesis. But his own people just don't get it, and they don't want to get it, is the thing. That's the thing, is it breaks him up on the inside to see his people kneel down to him when he wants them to stand. He doesn't want them to bow down to some figure. They want to create a new dictator for themselves, a new person to rally behind as their guy to strike back and do all of these things. But that's not what Jakar's message is about at all. And Rachel, with Jakar during the season, he's been mainly paired up with Londo. A lot of his stuff has been Londo-based, but this has been bubbling in the background.
Yeah, we know that, and we've seen him really struggle with it when he first came back from Centauri Prime after the book had been leaked. And it's... I'm struggling to explain it because I'm just like, I like it. It's good.
I did not foresee that the Jakar journey was going to end up with him basically exiling himself to go on a spin-off that never was with Lita Alexander. I mean, she goes off with him. I guess that is his happy ending, you know?
Yeah.
You can
They can find out what their pleasure thresholds are.
Exactly.
She knows she doesn't have
one. It's unsaid. Yeah, and he's going to find out his, I guess. So, you know, they're going to go explore the universe. He's going to walk the earth, walk the space. But it is sad. You know, it's not what you would expect, because you would think that at some point the end of the story would be him finding out a way to make his teachings take effect, to reach his people. But that's not what happens. What happens is, it's not that he gives up. It's more that he becomes aware that this is beyond him, that at this point he can't tackle this problem. So he walks away from it, which is awesome. You don't see that as a resolution very often, that the solution or the end point of this story is just that he was like, all right, well, this is as much as I can do, so I'm just going to go do something else. It's a very elegant way to tackle a problem that, to try to fix it any other way would have taken a lot more time. And I think that the show, just seeing how far or how close we were to the end point, it was just like, this is the best way to handle it. Would I have liked an extra season of Jakar trying to indoctrinate his people? Maybe, but
we had a whole episode of him trying to teach them and they didn't get it. So he just gave up. He's like, oh, yeah, God is truth.
Stick your face in this book.
Stick the face in the book.
You have Emperor
Londo.
Londo, you can have Emperor Jakar,
but it's not
a contrast.
But as you see with all of the characters, even Sheridan, once you get to the top of the food chain power-wise, it's not always a great thing. There's a cost to it, and this is evidently Jakar's cost, right? He's reached the absolute pinnacle of enlightenment, and his people will never be there.
Right, maybe someday,
but not today.
Not today. Not this season, for sure.
For the last year, I've tried to point my people toward the simple truth that we are one, regardless of race. Somehow that message has gotten twisted, so that I have become their idea of the truth personified. Once you turn into this, you can no longer be who you are. You can only be what they want you to be, what they expect you to be.
We talk about other science fiction shows. It's not just Star Trek Discovery, but when we talk about Space Above and Beyond even, or even The Expanse, when they have their scenes like this, where they just sit down and they're basically reading a Nietzsche book at you, they don't always land. Sometimes they fall with a thud, and other times it's like you appreciate what they're going for. But many times with B5, we've just really soaked in these conversations. And in an episode like this, with a conversation between Franklin and Jakar, where it is about how humanity, our lives, our condition is a puzzle that God cannot solve. What is it about the sensibilities of this show that makes these moments hit?
I think it comes through more. I think it comes through more in the sensibility of the characters than the sensibility of the show. And obviously the characters are woven as part of the show as well. But it makes sense for these two characters to be having this conversation. And that's part of what sells it, because in other things it feels like the writers are speaking through the characters to explore this thing and to be all fancy and eloquent about philosophy, and it just comes across as wanky. But here, we know both of these characters really deeply, and we know that they are both very spiritual people. And them approaching this in these two ways, and not just discussing it. They're not trying to convince the other person. They're not arguing. They are just exploring a question.
They're both, I would say, they're the two most spiritual characters we have on the show right now. Like, at the end of the series, they're the two most... And it's funny because Delenn is religious and Lanier are religious, but they have a certain belief system and mindset that doesn't allow for this type of conversation.
No,
they are like destiny
rigid.
is destiny. Yeah, it's very rigid, and they are just so confident. And what I appreciate
also,
about...
the Mbryo are insular in their philosophy.
Thanks to our good friend Sinclair.
Whereas the foundationalists and
Jakar.
Jakar's developing philosophy are very open and inquisitive and also reactionary.
And I think that is, with everything you've said, on top of that, I think that is why I enjoy the Babylon 5 philosophy lessons, or the exploration of these themes, whether they're religious or not.
It's not telling you to have a certain view.
Julio, Dr. Franklin comes into Jakar's quarters, and they have this conversation about how Why are there puzzles that we cannot solve? Like, why is it that every time I think I've got a handle on things, I'm proven otherwise? Why is it so difficult? And what do you think about this dynamic, these two characters, and some of the things that we were just talking about?
I think it fits. My first thought when you were talking about this, when you started bringing up the Franklin-Jakar relationship, was that I think I might have brought it up last time I was on the show. I don't remember which episode we did, but there was a point in the series where Garibaldi and Jakar were the, the big relationship in B5 as far as, or one of the strong relations, right? It went from Garibaldi and Londo to Garibaldi and Jakar, and now at some point it just shifted into Jakar and Franklin, which makes sense given the evolution of Jakar's character, right? I think that he's not going to be having this conversation with Garibaldi about God and the purpose of life and all that.
Garibaldi's agnostic. He ain't having it.
I mean, he could. Yeah, he's not interested in having that conversation. Franklin is. I think it's good. It works because on top of everything that you guys have said, it's just the way it's staged. It's just it doesn't wear out its welcome. It starts with a little bit of a comedy with the group of people out there, and then it gets into the conversation about God's puzzle, and then it gets out really fast before we start feeling like, all right, are we just jerking each other off here? It makes its point and then gets out. And that's something that I really appreciate when it doesn't work, when in those instances that it doesn't work either on this show or on other shows. On top of everything, it's also because they just really belabor what they're trying to say, and because they really want to make sure that you get it. And that's not something that happens here. I was, before I could even finish making my note of like, oh, they're talking about God and they're talking about spirituality and, life and the big plan, the big, the scheme of life, like it was over. We're moving on to the next thing, and I think that's when this type of thing works the best. Franklin, kind of like what you said, we're already done with the Franklin story, the big story. So it's just cool that they can keep finding uses for him, like to pop in on different characters and just help them move along to the rest of their journey.
A person that matters greatly in this episode, Rachel, someone that we love. We like to say we love Lita. And
no, we don't.
Yeah.
We love Lease.
No, Lease is later. Later for Lease. No, we often say we do like Lita a lot. Lita is a very much a character that we are drawn to overall, and it's a big episode for her. We've already said that she's getting up to quite a bunch of stuff, but how about you focus it in for us? Tell us what Lita is getting up to and your feelings
other than
on it.
Publicly meeting with arms dealers. Because you don't give a fuck.
She's so blatant. I love that observation. She's so blatant about it. She's just so obvious.
It's like, come on, you're doing shady shit. Be shady about it. But she's got no shame. She's out here to take down the Psychor, and she ain't taking shit from nobody no more. And then bites her in the ass, and Sheridan almost shoots her in the head.
She's using Babylon 5 for what purpose? So, like, how is she using it? So she's
it's following up on what we know is happening, which is that like the terrorist attacks on Psychor and Psychor property have begun, thanks to the money that she got in part from Jakar, but also from Via.
Oh yeah, because Via helped give her a bunch of money in the previous episode, but she's attacking the Psychor.
They blame it on Jakar.
She's attacking the Psychor. She's using these means financially to support the acts back home to attack, but she's using Babylon 5 as a staging ground. She's using it as a dealing place for weapons and funds and all of this other stuff. She's using what was our last best hope for peace to be a place to rally and get together, the ability to perform acts of unending terrorism is how it is described in the episode. And we have to say it, Rachel, you skipped a reason. Why is she doing this, though? Why is she doing this?
Like, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Franklin gives an exhaustive list of reasons why Lita should be pissed.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sheridan goes, nah, that's not it.
I don't get it. Why would she betray us?
There must be something else.
Well, the senator told us one of the reasons. Do you remember? Do you remember him? Do you remember? There was a British guy with long hair. I think he died earlier in the season, and then it takes like 12 episodes for anything to come from that.
Bite?
No, that's not a name. Oh, man, I wish I could remember.
No, I thought it was like one of the other like goons. Bite feels like it could be a name of a goon that tries to take over down below.
Yeah, him and Trace.
Yeah.
You know, it's a great thing. Every Babylon 5 viewer has made this exact same joke, which is no one remembers Byron because the show specifically told us to remember him, only for then the show not to bring it up all that much after it's done. And now it's being brought up. Yes, all jokes aside, she is remembering Byron, she's taken up the cause, and now she's doing it her way, which is through these awful, violent means. The people
as
back
Byron
home
would have wanted.
Well, no, but yes. But his way failed. His hippy-dippy way failed. So she's going to do it the way she knows best, which is to fuck shit up real good. And the people that she's given the weapons to don't even know how to use them. It goes back to the conversation they had at the end of the last episode, which is with the Drakh, or the Shadow Minions. There, they have the resources, they have the weapons, they have the means, but they don't know how, they don't know how they work, but they know what they want to do with them, and they'll kill people no matter what. And Lita, the terrorist, must be arrested. And this is when Lockley gets involved in the episode. They phone her up, and they're like, hey, Lockley, knock.
Zach comes in because it was a call for him that he was just like, I feel like you should be on this call too. It's kind of like when you're making a big important phone call and like you go to your parents and you put it on loudspeaker.
And I adore Tracy Scoggins' performance with the senator here, because the senator's laying out all of this heavy material. It's like, yeah, okay.
Why is this our problem?
I'm so sorry to hear that, but doesn't have anything to do with me. Don't you know I have other paperwork to deal with? I'm Captain Lockley. I'm busy. That's why I haven't been in most of the season. I'm busy. And then
she's too busy doing her job to get involved in the entire space politics situation.
That and working out on glass tables, of course. But, Julio, let's get it out of the way. Tell us your thoughts, your feelings, and your journey with Lita Alexander, because this is the big culmination of her journey as well, where when she started out, she was a representative for the Psi Corps. She was a mouthpiece for them. Then eventually she became a servant for the Vorlons, then threw her away. And then she became a reliable person for Sheridan and the gang. And then they threw her away. And then she joined a cult of weird telepaths who then promoted her to be their leader. And now here she is entering what you could say is her villain arc, her Dark Phoenix journey. But what do you think of it all? What do you think about Lita in general, and what happens in this episode?
I've thought a lot about Lita, trying to figure out why is it that the character doesn't really work for me, or at least that mostly doesn't work for me, the way that she seems to do with most Babylon 5 fans. I think on paper she should. I think that everything you just said sounds great. It sounds compelling, and it makes sense from one stage of her character development to the other. And it's like, yeah, she was willing to earn her keep at Babylon 5. They used her. They discarded her. She found another group of people that embraced her. That brought her great pain and sorrow. And now she's out to just avenge her love and represent her people, and all that stuff is cool. So So then I'm thinking, well, then it has to be the performance, right? Like there's just something about Patricia Tallman's performance that is just not really getting me on Lita's side when I should be. But then I'm thinking maybe it's just a little bit of the writing, like these things should happen. But there's a lot of, when I think of the Lita scenes, it's just hard. And this is, I think that nobody plays a telepath like Walter Koenig. Like he has it down. And I think also that there's no telepath that has been written as well as they write Bester. And so that's the standard that the show has set for telepath characters. And it's not just Lita. I mean, what's the name of the telepath in the station before her? Talia. Like, I had that problem with Talia, except that Talia didn't have that much story around her, so it wasn't as noticeable as with Lita. Lita becomes like a really big character. So
she's a war hero. She helped them end 2 of the wars that we see in the show, the Shadow Vorlon War and the Civil War, and they still can't give her a fucking break.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
Get out of your room, Lita. You don't give us enough money, you cunt. Oh, what's that? Sheridan gets upset when you have to make him pay rent.
And Zach has a crush on her. I mean, there's a lot going on with Lita. But I think it's a tough character, and there just has to be something wired in my mind that just has a really hard time taking it seriously when people are pretending to read somebody's mind or pretending to do something with their minds. Like I said, Koenig gets it. Koenig does it. Like whatever Walter Koenig does, I'm like, I buy it. He's reading that person's mind, or he's just manipulating that person, or whatever. When Patricia Tallman does it, there's like this barrier that just I can't take it seriously.
It's a psychic barrier.
Not all the time. Yeah, I guess so.
I do not choose to be arrested. I've done a lot for this place. And just once I think a little gratitude would be in order, don't you? Lita, don't force us to... To what?
To me, it always felt like the show was building up a very sympathetic person that was going to eventually take this villain turn. And by the time that the show is over, I mean, it's not even... She seems to be above it all, right? Like she's basically like a sort of new god by the time that the show is done. So they elevate her beyond our judgment. Sheridan's and everybody else's.
Rachel, what are your takes on this? What are your overall vibes with this? We've gone over it, but this is a big thing for her. Like this episode, she stands up and says, "Haven't I earned the rights that I'm owed
to be arrested?" Which is a line that's so ridiculous that you could never really get on board with somebody saying that. Like it just like,
but she's tired.
Yeah, and I think we've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm on Lita's side, even if the show isn't, because it's just like, yeah, what she wants is not unreasonable, and she's tried to do it to get what she wants in a reasonable way, and they stop her.
She's a hero, and they don't care. Like no one cares. Like here's a thing to think about, Julio. We've said it many times, but Lita Alexander is the only person in the show who has no friends. She has no friends.
I mean, she has all those Vorlons. She had them.
Who used her, abused her, and threw her away.
Yep.
She has no friends.
No.
Isn't that
everybody treats her like a tool or a weapon.
Or a problem. It's like Lita can stand up for herself and we sympathize with her. But remember back in the last season, we had that conversation about Sheridan giving her the dressing down for blowing up Zaha Doom with her brain. And it was played beautifully as a real mixture of you feel conflicted because Sheridan may have a point, but also he's being such a prick about it.
Yeah.
But you feel bad for Lita. But then at the end of the series, you get to this point and the show's like, nah, Sheridan's right to treat Lita that sternly, because if she's left to her own devices, she's a problem. She's a menace. If only she listened to this guy.
But she is left to her own devices. Yeah, at the end.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing is like, Because throughout the whole show, whenever she's tried to do the right thing, characters like Sheridan will come in and or say, "Get out of your room. You're not paying us enough. Fuck you." And it's like, eventually, like you said, it's clear she's going to go through this villain turn. But I think it's hilarious that none of the characters like all the characters like, what? Why did this happen? It's like,
you mean we treated her like trash and now she's fighting against us?
Lockley isn't surprised. When Lockley goes to meet her in the Zocalo in the main area, she's ready for a fight. She's like, we're going to have to fight Lita. That's why I've got all of my boys. That's the difference between Lockley and Sheridan as commanding officers of Babylon 5. Sheridan's the type of guy where it's like, if Byron came up to him and said, let's meet in an alleyway at night by ourselves, he would. Well, Lockley's like, I didn't come alone. I brought all of the guards, all of them. And Lita is blatantly breaking the rules. And as stated, Patricia Tolman, I think she nails it in this episode. I think this is great. I think she gets to really just... It's like she gets to unload. It's just Lita Alexander must be hard to play because Lita's whole entire character is to be shit on. That's her character. Is just this week Lita gets shit on in this way. This week Lita gets thrown across the room. This week we yell at Lita, and in this episode she's the one that's like, no. I'm demanding how things go today, and I'm going to tap my fingers as you go through the whole thing about how you're going to arrest me. I should come quietly, and I refuse to be arrested, actually. And Rachel, this is a monumental scene, and is there any way to describe how Lita takes over the whole room of people outside of just saying it's really fucking awesome?
I was going to go with badass. But, it's very much in the similar vein as awesome, so I don't know if it fully counts. Does it meet your brief, Ryan?
I guess it meets the brief. I think it's also just, with Talia and with Lita, they're always so put upon, like, they can't catch a fucking break, either of them. And so when you get to a point where they're going, like, Lita is going to use her mind powers for this truly extravagant set piece in which the thrust of her point is, give me a fucking break. Let me do what I need to do. Stop putting me down. And she does this in the most villainous way possible.
Of my way.
Get out of my fucking way. And she's righteous about it. She's like, I cannot be stopped. Don't you know who I am? You think that I'm a nothing, but in fact, I'm the most important person in the whole entire galaxy right now. Until JMS reminded Lita that she's not the main character of the show. There's a certain John Sheridan that is. But Julio, I know for a fact that this was one of your favorite scenes of the season, at least. You said to me...
I sent you a screenshot.
You said a screenshot. That's how important it was. And you just said JMS managed to write one of the best scenes of the show right near the end.
Yeah, it was... I don't remember if I said that, but I probably said something along those lines. I didn't see it coming, I guess. And I... See, it's funny how we experience this whole thing differently, because I think that when I was watching this scene, I was like, oh yeah, this is what we've been building up to. So to me, it made sense. Like, the construction of the Lita story was like, oh, she's been this tragic character, and it was inevitable that at some point she was just going to get tired of being pushed around, and she was going to push back, and she has the power to really do some damage when she pushes back. So my expectation was that this scene was going to be something that was not going to end with her being captured. I was like, oh no, from here on, it's just going to be her being, taking over the station or whatever else is going to happen. So it came out of nowhere. I did not expect Sheridan to show up like right as things were about to explode with a gun and remind everybody that he's also been touched by the Vorlons. That was, I see, I'm sorry, Rachel. That's the badass part for me. I was like, I'm a Sheridan fanboy, I guess.
You love Bruce Boxleitner's gravelly voice when he says that, you're not the only one.
And the facial hair. I think
he's Tron.
The daddy facial hair is...
He's Tron. He fought for the users.
it's such a tense scene, and it just goes, back and forth. And look, I am on the side of the Babylon 5 people, not in the way that they treat Lita, but in the sense of, I think the episode does a pretty good job of showing you what the stakes are for them. It's not just that in this case, Lita's trying to get better service at the restaurant and she's causing a scene and they're trying to stop her. I mean, there are serious repercussions to what she's doing that affect the station directly. So Lockley and Zach and everybody else, like, they're doing their job. And so it feels like,
but isn't it
I get it.
Yeah, but it's like you said, it's a great escalation of what we knew was going to happen, because we spent half the season of Lita trying to get these things the quote-unquote correct way, by the rules. We're going to try and form a relation with the Interstellar Alliance, and we're going to try and have meetings and try and do this and this and this. And Sheridan would just keep saying, nah, it's too much work. How about you don't bother me? And then eventually it gets to this point where it's like, no, I'm going to have to put my fucking foot down and say, let me do what I want because you aren't giving us rights. That's the funniest thing. Like, Sheridan's a badass in this moment, but in a roundabout way, he's putting a gun against the head of someone who tried to be a civil rights activist and then turned terrorist because of him.
I think that you're putting a lot of blame on Sheridan specifically.
He was the one who rejected their claims. He was like, it's too much. He said it's impossible when they asked, like, could you help us? And it's like, go back to those episodes. Sheridan is the president of Earth. Like, they quote that. It's like, now you're in charge. You actually know that idealism has to be thrown to the side at times for practicality. And these telepaths are like, hey, help us. And he's like, no. Only if you be spies for me. And they're like, but we don't want to be spies.
Where you have to give him credit is that he doesn't shoot Lita.
No.
He just captures her.
He just captures her, but he wants to shoot her.
Well,
But we didn't ask this. The whole arc for, you said the Lita arc, but Byron's there, and this is all about Byron. What did you think of that? And overall? Because this is, in a way, a conclusion to it.
Yeah, I wonder if I also would be a little more on... It's not that I'm not on Lita's side, it's just that I'm not opposed to her being stopped. But if I was more invested in her relationship with Byron, maybe I would feel more strongly about what she's, the whole, like, remember Byron thing, it just...
Do you remember Byron?
I remember what he looked like. And I remember thinking that he was going to stick around for the whole season. I was kind of surprised when that didn't happen. But I don't know. The Byron episodes, they felt... I guess I would have to rewatch the whole season from the beginning to see how it feels now. But I just remember at the time thinking, okay, so this is going to lead to the telepath war, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that ended up not really. I mean, I guess in a way it does, but not in a direct way like I was expecting season 5 to be. So it just kind of felt like this mini arc. Like, I didn't hate the character. I just felt like it was
a journey to get Lita to where she is now. That is it. Like, how do you get Lita Alexander to turn against the establishment that she's been pivotal to? Oh, she falls in with a cult. And then she becomes the head of the cult, and now they've got her in a straitjacket at the end of this episode. Did you notice that? Did you ever notice? I always forget, but that scene where she's talking to Garibaldi, that's a straitjacket. I always thought that she just had her arms crossed because she was pissed off, but it's a straitjacket. But a straitjacket with a little boob window, which is always good because it's sci-fi in the 90s. You always need the boob windows. Isn't that right, Rachel? Isn't that right? It's important to have that in the costume.
Of course.
Garibaldi needs to help her out because he has a whole storyline, but he strikes up a deal with Lita Alexander to help her fight back against the Psi Corps because she needs to destroy them because that's her only goal in life now. She's no longer trying to forge a new path for the telepaths. It's about destroying the enemy now. And what happens between them, Rachel, Garibaldi, and Lita? What is the revelations had here and the deal being made?
I do want to say, even on a rewatch, I like the way that they play this out of, like, the they have the first scene. Garibaldi leaving Lise to be like, I'm going to try and go kill 2 teeps with 1 stone. And then how he fails to have the upper hand with her. And he proposes, like, I can help you get out of here if you get rid of that neural block. So, because if I can kill Bester, it's going to solve my problem.
By the way, it's not about revenge, it's about control. That's what I keep telling myself.
And she's like, oh no, I can't cure your addiction. And he's like, oh no, I don't give a fuck about that. I want to kill Bester.
But again, it's not revenge, it's control. That's what it's really about, Lita. And she's like, yeah, sure. I already know what that storyline is because I've gone through it, but sure, keep going.
And then we sort of get a teaser because she says at the end of the scene, I have a counter proposal. And it's not until after sort of everything gets put into place that it is revealed.
And the reveal is, Garibaldi, we're going to have 2 accounts. I'm going to have the friendly one that someone like Lockley can appreciate, which is raising money for charitable things, blah, 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 blah. But what you're going to do with your evil corporation, I mean your cool corporation, is we're going to have a secret account that's for helping destroy the Psi Corps, and you're going to make sure to do that, because if you betray me, which I doubt you would do, I will destroy you, I will kill you. And isn't that just a nice way to talk to a friend? But we aren't friends.
Lita
we
doesn't
are
have friends.
Business associates. And will you sign this deal with me?
At best.
And in 2 years, if things have gone the way they have gone, I'll remove the block. And why does she want to keep it going, Rachel?
It's a great motivator.
I loved how Patricia Tallman delivered that, where she comes across as like an evil HR person. But she reveals something very important, Rachel, because Garibaldi, he needs something in return. If you're going to dick me like this, I need an answer. And what's the question he needs an answer to, and what is the answer? Do you remember? You're giving me this look. Come on, Rachel. She's just your everyday doomsday machine.
She explains that she's a nuke. That she was manipulated so much by the Fallens. Altered that she's not a small weapon, she's not a medium-sized weapon, she's a let's burn everything to the ground sort of weapon.
Excel.
And then I love her glowing eyes and being like, pleased to meet you, Mr. Garibaldi.
Because Garibaldi is like, look, we all know that you got altered by the Vorlons, but like, what the fuck are you? Like, what's the extent? We know it's gills, but what else? Oh, your doomsday machine? Oh no! And he signed a deal with a living weapon, a weapon of mass destruction.
You can help me destroy the Psi Corps and free my people.
Well, why not just remove the neural block?
Because it's a great motivator. You won't rest until it's gone, and I'm the only hope you've got of ever getting rid of it.
Garibaldi gets found out. His alcoholism no longer is just known to a few people who are going to keep it a secret for him as he figures it out. He fucks up. He fucks up, and he fucks up in a way that isn't melodramatic or huge. In episodes previously, he's cost lives. He fell asleep and people died and wars began and ended because of his alcoholism. But what gets him in the end is just he's late to a meeting, isn't prepared, and he's clearly drunk. It's mundane.
Yeah. Yep. He mixed up the times.
It's
could happen to anyone.
Yeah, no. It's just something small, something inconsequential, but it's too noticeable. And Sheridan gets in full dad.
It tips it over. And Sheridan admits that he had suspicions.
And he didn't want to really believe.
He was choosing to ignore the warning signs. And I love how Sheridan is just like, everybody else, you can go. And
Sheridan, I need you in the corridor because I'm going to have to get you to talk me down.
Delenn, I'll see you in the corridor. And then Garibaldi tries to go, and he's like, not you.
Not you, you stay.
You stay here, mister.
He's ready to be a dad because he's full dad mode in this episode.
Yes, he is.
And full soldier mode in this episode.
And I love that we don't hear what Delenn says to him.
We know her well enough where she can talk to John in a way.
And it doesn't
that
matter
diffuses
exactly
him.
what she says. It matters what impact those words have, which is why the emphasis is on the acting rather than the writing in that moment.
Julio, you have aired out some grievances a little bit already with Garibaldi. You said you liked him early on as this everyman character, but he becomes this tortured figure over time. So crack it open. Let us hear more about your views, your thoughts, your hot takes on Michael Alfredo Garibaldi.
Is his middle name Alfredo? Really?
Yes, he's named after his dad, Alfredo.
I'm sure. Oh, yeah, he tells that to Franklin, right?
Yeah.
I think.
Franklin's dad knew his dad because they served in the Dilgai War.
Such a long time ago. It's so weird. Like, binge. I mean, I know I didn't binge it, maybe.
You were
as
on that
quickly
episode's discussion for Gropos.
Yeah, no, but I was thinking about how it feels like so long ago, and yet I experienced this series in a much more, compressed fashion than people that were watching it as it aired. So some of the character journeys, I mean, it has to felt, and like somebody like Garibaldi, where, like I said, the way that the character changes, is so dramatic in a way. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, because it does, but it is, it's very different, like how he starts the show and, how he ends the show. And yeah, I liked him at the beginning because he was the fun character, and he was kind of like the character that would bring levity to, whenever things got too heavy. And it's funny because I've never thought that the Garibaldi-centric episodes worked very well. It's almost like that character worked better when he was on the periphery, just assisting, like being support, keeping things running as far as the plot goes. But then he gets this really heavy storyline with the alcoholism in season 5. And it's just, I mean, I don't know. It's funny because I've heard people on your show say that they didn't like Garibaldi and that this is the story that finally got them to like the character, right? And I guess that makes sense. If you didn't like what they were doing before, then you get to this part and you're like, oh, finally, they're doing something with the character that I can relate to, that I can feel. And I'm not saying that he's not relatable in this story. I mean, I think the acting is good. I think that the writing for the most part is good, but it also felt like, I guess I find him more interesting as a recovering alcoholic than as a relapsing alcoholic, as far as like how they treated the story, and I understand that it's part of his journey and that basically you probably don't get to the end point of the Garibaldi story unless he relapses and he has this stretch of episodes where he's just a complete fuck up and, goes through all these things. But it was always through season 5, which, like I said, might be my favorite season of the show. It was always the least interesting part of the story. It's like there were really cool things happening in Babylon 5, like in the station and in the planets around it, and things that I hadn't really seen many shows do, or at least angles being taken on certain stories I'd never seen before. And the Garibaldi plotline is kind of like, oh, well, I mean, yeah, he relapsed, and I've seen that before, it just felt like it was always the part of season 5 that I was least excited about. So this at least kind of like brings it to a close. And, at times it feels that it's the opposite of what we're saying, about the Franklin Sheridan discussion about, are you keeping the baby or not? Where it's just so measured and so, it's not preachy. It's not, it just gets, again, it gets in and out. And all the stuff with Lockley in this scene, in this episode, it just felt a little bit like, oh, this is a very special episode of Babylon 5 where we're going to talk about Garibaldi's origins as an alcoholic and Lockley's origins as an alcoholic.
Well, yeah, because I think a part of it is no one's done that, right? Like, we've seen throughout this season, multiple people realize that he's relapsed, and they've tried to approach it in certain ways. Even Sheridan in this episode makes it very much a case of, you have a problem, and you have to sort your problem out. And then you have Lockley and Lise come into the episode and say, yes, you have a problem, and it's not just you, by the way. Here's other people who have this problem. Here's other people who understand your mental headspace, and you're not alone. Which is the interesting thing of other characters, although they want to be supportive, they want to be there, they want to make sure he knows that he's not alone, they just don't get to him the way he needs to, which is to follow him. Lockley has that line of like, you're just running away to see if I'll follow you. Like, that's what he needs. But other characters will like trust him or like have this unsure quality, like Sheridan says, of like, I didn't want to believe it, so I let it happen and I feel bad about it. First off, you're being very gentlemanly about it, because in our tweets and our messages back and forth, you would be like, Garibaldi's such a sad sack. I wish he would fucking get over it. Like, I'm just like, ooh. But here's something I think too that is a sting in the wound to you is, this isn't just Garibaldi season 5 becomes a relapsed alcoholic. It's off the back of season 4 using all of the negative or more questionable traits of his character and only using those and not using the positive things that you liked about him, because by design, that was the plot. Like, the plot is, let's remove Garibaldi of all of his good stuff and crank up all of his bad stuff. And then instead of the fallout being Garibaldi is going to spend the season getting revenge against Bester and finally getting Bester's going to get his comeuppance, it's he can't do that. And he destroys himself. It's like, it's very sad. Instead of Garibaldi having like this magnificent, like, learning from the previous season of being a jerk, instead it's him declining. It's like him falling, him having to go through broken glass. It's like the previous season fucked him up so much that he's not even allowed to get revenge. So what does he do? Lockley says it. It's like, well, you might as well destroy yourself.
Yeah, but there's that breaking point towards the end of season 4 that it's a really good payoff. Like, when they explain why he's been behaving the way he's been behaving, it's great. I mean, it recontextualizes the season in a way that it wasn't pleasant to watch, but I get it. I connected the dots in a way that I'm like, okay, that's really cool. And there are moments in season 5 where I really appreciate the jadedness. I mean, one of the things that I do like about the scenes between him and Lockley is that it is Lockley. And they even reference the fact that they've been clashing from the moment that she arrived at the station. And his distrust of Lockley is an element of the character that I really enjoy in season 5, without having to take him to the extreme of like, okay, well, now he's just going to be completely ineffectual. And it's not that I have a problem with him being ineffectual. It's just that I have a problem with the way that, the story beats that we went through during his spiral. We're just a little too familiar.
Would you prefer if he went on a walkabout to cure his addiction?
Not a big fan of the walkabout either. So
yeah, exactly. Like but that's the thing about B5, yeah, where it's very human problems, and we see in real life, not just in fictional narratives, that the story of recovering addicts or alcoholics or whatever the case may be, and relapsing ones, there's just certain things that just it happens this way, and there is some dramatic weight to the fact that this is JMS basically writing about Jerry Doyle drinking too much. Like, this is basically the show commenting upon that the actor who played Garibaldi, who would eventually die from drinking himself to death, was doing this stuff. And it's like, because that's just how it is. But from a narrative perspective, it's like you've seen the Uncle Mike, you're drunk again type story really quite often. And so it's like, how do you make it special? How do you make it translate? And I think with what this episode does very well is we get someone that is like a very similar character. That's the thing. Like Lockley and him butt heads because they see too much of themselves in each other. But the thing is, Lockley's version of that control that Garibaldi had isn't done through this comedic lens like he was in season 1, where it's like Garibaldi is the type of guy who has like logic within logic, circles within circles. Like he just has this kind of screwy way of the world. She's very like, I work because I have a very strict military code to how I control things. But the thing is, they both have the same fucking problems and the need to be in charge, because if they can't, they destroy themselves. And Rachel, Lockley has been a character that upon rewatches has grown more fondly over time. And this is, I think it's fair to say, the absolute best stuff she gets in the show. This is probably Tracy Scoggins' best work that she's been given, and probably gets entirely within Babylon 5. But what do you think about how Lockley has her little intervention, her little conversation with Garibaldi, and what's revealed?
I adore it. And it is, it's not a reveal that she's an addict, because we knew that. We knew that from Day of the Dead. That stuff gets rehashed here. But it's the way that she deeply understands what it is like to have an addiction and what it means, like in terms of the need for control. And we get the story of how she experienced that as being a loved one of somebody with an addiction. And that was her dad.
Someone that she couldn't help. And in that perilousness, she became the thing that she despised. Julio, Lockley confronts Garibaldi. It's a very heavy set of scenes. It's a real head turner. It makes Garibaldi really reconsider things. He gets hot, and he gets hot under the collar too. He gets hot-headed during this scene, during this moment. He throws stuff. He yells. He gets real aggressive about it. He's really mean. He's not playing it safe. Like, he's like, oh, congratulations, you figured out that I'm mad? Fuck you, Lizzie. Like, what do you think about how Lockley, not only just Lockley the character, but that this big journey for Garibaldi is helped to be resolved by this new presence in the series?
Well, I've liked Lockley from early on. To my surprise, I think you might remember, I was obviously, Ivanova was my favorite character, so to just basically see a character that was brought in to replace her was tough. And but I've liked her. I thought that it was what they gave her to do whenever they gave her to do something was always interesting, the way that she clashed with other characters, and just the position that she was put in running Babylon 5, but still being under Sheridan's supervision, and just basically they treated her as a new character, which was, it wasn't just like they brought this new captain and then suddenly everybody else around her behaved like she'd been there the whole time. So that was,
she wasn't Warren Keffer.
Good. Exactly. They gave her a character to play. So this is not like, this was the episode that made me like her. I mean, I was surprisingly, I was on the Lockley bandwagon from early on season 5. This is just, like I said, I think it just goes on for too long. I don't know. It's not the acting. It's just that in an episode where so many scenes are very economical in their storytelling, I think that in an effort to make this one hit harder, they just went on for too long. I was just, because it's already powerful enough to have them in the same room, kind of like sharing this moment without really going over it so much. You know what I mean? Like it's Lockley and it's Garibaldi. They've been antagonists through season 5, and we know, like Rachel said, we know that she's had a history with addiction, whether it actually was a serious problem or a phase. I mean, we know that she has that backstory. So we're ready. It's almost like we don't need her to explain so much. It's just her being there, trying to make a connection. He rejects her, and then she brings Lise in. I think that would be just as effective. It would be less of a showcase, I guess, for the actors. But I would feel like it was more
but isn't
effective.
The point to show that he's not alone? Because in this episode, Sheridan is lamenting the fact that he doesn't get it, that he can't help. He's not. He just doesn't have the means. Garibaldi, I'm suspending you of your job until you figure out your problem on your own, because I don't know how to do that. And then Lise is there at the end to really hammer in that it's like, you are not by yourself. And that's what Lockley is saying. Like, Lockley's like, the door is always there. Like, someone that you hate, actually can understand this because I also go through it.
I couldn't help my father, and I couldn't help myself at the time, but maybe I can help you the only way I know how. By telling you all that, at least you know you're not alone. Everything else, it's up to you.
We love Lise. We love Lise. We love Lise.
All I could think of as soon as she showed up.
You love her too, right?
I
say yes.
I appreciated her in this episode.
Say yes. Say, I love Lise.
I do love Lise. Now that you brought it up.
Now that you remind me, Ryan, I love Lise. Thank you for the reminder.
That feeling inside me. Yeah, that is love.
What I think this episode is good at is showing us how she understands him when he's in such a troubled place. They've been through this many times. You feel like Lise and Garibaldi have this history, have gone through this, and they will go through it again. The problem is, unlike with Lockley, who's been here for this season alone, is I don't know what their relationship is like outside of crisis management. Like, Lockley and Garibaldi are too similar to one another, and we've seen that be played out in many different ways during the season, and we see it be brought to its ultimate form in this episode. But Lise, it's like, when they're not just dealing with this, there's no interesting facets to their relationship.
The fact that she's never here when they're not having a fucking problem.
Sinclair and Catherine Sakai had a deeper relationship, and she was in 3 episodes of the show. Lise has been in like 9 episodes across the 5 seasons, and we know, as Julio, you especially know, that B5 doesn't need characters to be compelling and have raw chemistry and complement our mains by having them be in more than a dozen episodes. Like, Naroon was in 5 episodes of the show, and he was like one of the greatest parts of Delen's story. Like, yeah, and the Regent, who we just wrapped up on, he was only in a handful of episodes too, and it's like across several seasons. It's like, I think that's it. But to give her some compliments, I think the writing for Lise is very good in this episode. It's just, what is their relationship outside of these particular conversations? What is it? Julio, what do you think about it all?
I think the sex is probably amazing. That's really, and they just couldn't show it.
That's actually, you know what's funny about that? I make joke posts about Lise every time she shows up. I'm like, we love Lise. And then people will message us and drop a comment, and some people are like, you're being a liar, you're being snarky. But 9 times out of 10, the real reason people think Lise is a good character is because they think she's hot. That's it. That's all I've heard. Most of the time, or she is good for Garibaldi's journey. Like, 2 functions. It's like, she's good for Garibaldi's journey, and she's hot. And it's like, oh, okay.
Well, I wasn't thinking Garibaldi's journey. I think that maybe some people just like her. And I can see how maybe I could appreciate just the fact that she is good for him. Not necessarily, I don't know, for the journey, but just, you know, to see a character that is somewhat of a good influence, or that has a sort of connection, even if, you know, we're just being told about it. For Garibaldi, I mean, maybe that's something that that you just embrace because you're like, okay, can you give him something? You know, it'd be like somebody embracing Byron because Byron was good for Lita, or because, you know, he showed kindness to Lita. So maybe in that sense, I can understand it. I've never found the Lise stories very interesting. That's the thing. It's not even so much the character, but just like the situations that she's put in. I always think of like, oh yeah, there's a lot of like running around and there's like people pointing guns at each other.
Don't forget that she was pregnant with Franz's baby. Remember that? You remember that?
No.
That's how he met Lise. He was like, oh no, I have a girl back home on Mars and the riots are happening and then he gets in contact. He's like, I love you. And she's like, I'm pregnant and I'm married to a guy named Franz. And then he's like, fucking Franz. And then the series had to write Franz out so that Garibaldi could be involved with her again. It's like, oh, Franz kidnapped my kid or whatever. It's like, okay, sure. We're talking about Lise very much so because we are up to the spotlight section of the show. Rachel, could you give us all a brief rundown on what Spotlight is? No, not the Michael Keaton film starring Mark Ruffalo as well. Spotlight, Oscar-winning film Spotlight. No, we're not talking about that today, but what are we doing in the Spotlight section of Yum Yum Podcast?
We shine our light on a actor's performance in maybe a specific episode, or maybe they're in a few, which is the case with the actress who plays Lise, whose name is
Denise? What was it? Is it Denise Gentile?
Gentile.
Gentile. She's a Gentile. Yes, who is the actress of Lise.
9 episodes.
9 episodes from season 1 to all the way to the end. She's one of the season 1 performers they kept around. They kept her in the back pocket. And although there's a lot of shit talking about the character of Lise, does that translate to shit talking of the performance of Lise overall, Rachel? What do you think about the performance?
I think the performance is good. I think she does a reasonable amount with what she is given. What do you think, though?
Yeah, I've always liked this performance. I think she does the sweet, tender scenes really well. She does the concern really well. But she is also a fiery presence. When she has to get mean or she has to push back against Garibaldi, she does it really well. And also, she perfectly captures with just her physicality this lived-in sense of this is a person that's known Garibaldi at his worst. I don't need all the time the lines of dialogue to give me that. I can just tell by the way she's holding herself or the way she's reacting or her expressions that that's the case. I just like to kick Lise the character, but I've always maintained that the performance has never been the problem for myself. Julio, what do you think about the performance for Lise?
I guess it's fine. I mean, I guess like Rachel said, she does what she can with what she's given. There's not a whole lot that you could do the way that the character is pitched. Like I was saying earlier, you know, I don't know if there's a better way of playing Lise that gives you more chemistry with Garibaldi. But for what it is, I mean, I was happy for him. I was happy for them, I guess, you know, that they sorted it out at the end. And my other thought was that I wish, this is not a performance, I guess it's on the show, right? I wish that she had come across as more of a capable businesswoman that was recruiting an asset to her company instead of playing it more as in like, I don't know what you're doing. Can you come over and help me run the company?
I'm in over my head.
Then at least
I'm just a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That little change would have given her character a new dimension.
Yeah, it would have. I think that with Lise, it's a lot of small things that could make a big difference.
I think the problem is if you pitched it that way, you'd have to inherently change what her character was at the end of the day, which from the very beginning, she was supposed to just be an average person. She wasn't supposed to be this powerful individual who's confident and calm and collected. She was supposed to be your nice, everyday woman who Garibaldi ideally should end up with, but because of his insecurities and because of his alcoholism, he blows up what is a perfect, healthy relationship.
Mhm.
She's just supposed to be the for lack of a better term, she's supposed to be your traditional female role. And that can suck in a series where many of the women aren't portrayed that way. So there's this longing of wanting her to be more than that. But the thing is, that's what she is. And even then, not enough time is spent with it.
Mhm.
Like, could you tell, I say this all the time, Julio, what does she love about him? We know what he loves about her. It's like, oh, he's this, she's this beautiful thing in his life that betters him. But what does she love about him?
I mean, maybe she just likes his ruggedness, his jadedness. She seems like a pretty happy person.
Yeah. Like,
So it's just a sunshine and grumpy relationship.
Yeah, maybe. She likes balancing him out. She likes him balancing her out.
Is okay. Like, you don't even sound convinced.
Kind of like grasping at straws. You
could say there's no reason.
Well, I'm sure there's a reason. It's just that the show doesn't really give it to us.
Okay, well, I have a little bit more on Lise as a character, because on her IMDb, she has listed that she did an interview for the Babylon 5 official magazine. And I couldn't track down the magazine, unfortunately.
You could track down volumes and issues around that specific one, but not that specific one, which is annoying.
But what I did find was the Babylon 5 compendium.
Oh.
So I searched through and looked for references to Lise. So there's some details of the character that we can go over and maybe see if we remember these things or not.
Can I just express that the name of the article that she was in the Babylon 5 magazine was
Garibaldi's Girl?
That's what she is.
Oh, no.
What was that, Julio? Oh, no. She's Garibaldi's girl. That's what she is. But what does the compendium have to say?
So this is in the Garibaldi, Michael Alfredo, in brackets, security chief.
Thank you.
Which says... Later in the year, Garibaldi began working for Mars Colony Security. It was a tough job, and the only thing that made it worthwhile for Garibaldi was Lise Hampton, a young woman whom he met a few days after he started work. They built a serious relationship together and even talked about marriage a few times.
Yes, that happened.
Yeah, I remember those things being told to me. Lise became the one woman who really meant something to Garibaldi. I also remember him saying that. However, the couple became closer and closer. Garibaldi became more and more afraid of commitment, afraid that she would leave him, afraid she loved him.
Yes.
And afraid he loved her. Then, when Sinclair offered him the post of security chief on Babylon 5,
he left.
Yeah.
There was the interesting thing, too, that she referenced, which is crazy, by the way. He had met Sinclair twice and then left with him. When you watch the series, you feel like these guys have known each other for years. But in fact, Julio, they'd known each other on 2 encounters.
That was in 2256. He saw a chance to redeem himself and accepted the job. Lise refused to leave her life on Mars behind, and the couple had a massive argument, which ended with him taking the first transport to Babylon 5, which was referenced in Voice.
Yep. And we saw it in Babylon Square.
Garibaldi had only met Sinclair on 2 occasions.
I knew it.
When he was offered the post. He didn't speak to Lise again until 2258, when he contacted her after the Mars riot. He apologized for what he had done and told her that he still loved her and wanted to resume their relationship. He then learned that she had married a man named Franz and they were expecting their first child.
You know what's really great? At the beginning, I said what Lita's arc was during the show, and Julio remarked like, oh, it actually sounds really compelling when you break it down like that, and it's really great. That's what I'm getting right now with Lisa's story. It's like, oh, this happened in the show. That's actually cool. But then when you watch the show, it's just you're told that. You're not experiencing these things. I guess some of it you are, but not in the fullest sense of it.
So this is the entirety of her entry in the compendium.
Yes.
Hampton, Lise. A former girl...
Don't forget Edgar's.
No, they just have it as Hampton.
Don't they know that she has many... She's going to add Garibaldi to that. What's next? Nahasapima Pedalon?
A former girlfriend of Michael Garibaldi. The couple first met each other a few days after Garibaldi had been stationed on Mars and had spent over a year together when he was offered the post of Chief Security Officer aboard Babylon 5. Lise had a life, a job, and some friends on Mars and didn't want to leave. The couple argued and Garibaldi took the first shuttle to the station. During the Mars Rebellion in 2258, Lise was caught in the crossfire trying to get food. When Garibaldi contacted her to try and restart their relationship, he learned that she was married to Franz and was expecting their first child, played by Denise Gentile.
That's it.
That's it.
Thank you. I feel bad because, Denise Gentile, she's had not the biggest career. She's been... in projects over the years, small roles here. This is a big thing. This is, when you look at her IMDb, this is the thing that she is probably most well known for and has the most substantial to work with. And yet it is arguably one of the most thankless roles that the series has outside of, say, Warren Keffer. But with Warren Keffer, that by design, that was specifically made out of spite. This is a character that's supposed to be the one of the most important aspects of the series, because Garibaldi, his journey, as you just went through, Rachel, in meticulous detail, it keeps coming back to Lise. It keeps coming back to her.
I will say that I also just quickly confirmed that in this compendium, there are more references to Keffer than there are to Lise.
No, you can't do that. You can't do
Keffer
that.
has 23, Lise has 10.
Oh, no.
Well, Keffer closed season 2.
Oh,
That's
and that's important. But as said, she's been in a few things over the years. It seems like she wrapped up...
appeared in Crossing Jordan.
Yeah, there was a thing called Shrink Test, which doesn't link to anything in 2010, but it seems like in the late 2000s she finished in film and television work. She was on ER, she was on Walker, Texas Ranger. She has done the usual stint on Babylon 5 related shows that we see, like Mike Hammer, Private Eye. She was on Murder, She Wrote, of course.
ER.
And of course, she is one of those people who did your occasional schlock. She's one of those people who did things like Netherworld, which is like a fucking exploitation campy thing where she had to play like a sexy seductress type. And with her voice, you can definitely tell how she could play that. But for the most important things, she was in an episode of Quantum Leap. She was in an episode of Quantum Leap where she got to act off of Scott Bakula playing a piano. And it's not a particularly great episode of Quantum Leap.
And do you want to qualify, because they did some weird shit in Quantum Leap. It's not Scott Bakula. His soul is a piano.
He's playing a person who knows how to play piano, but it's not the episode where he's playing a blind guy who knows how to play the piano. That's a different episode altogether, so don't get it twisted, don't get it confused.
I lost you twice, Michael. I have no intention of losing you again. I'm offering you love and passion and co-ownership of one of the biggest corporations on Mars.
What is a truly fascinating thing is we have, in Season 5, encountered someone very similar to Denise Gentile, unless, Rachel, you're going to surprise me. We did an actor previously who they're just gone. They just disappeared. Tom McCreevy, who played the snooty Centauri minister. Now, Denise Gentile, I don't know what happened to her. She's just gone.
No.
Into the ether.
It's very weird. I found a Reddit post that was also trying to figure her out, and somebody was theorizing that she was a real estate person, and then you look at the photos and you're like, that's not her.
Different lady. Here's a confusing thing. You can still regularly get autographed pictures of Lise from her. So she's still around in some way, but from what I could tell, she's never done the convention circuit, really. Like, Lise, where is she? Where's this person? Like, I can't find any, like, theater stuff. I can't find really anything. It's just like, oh, she got an interest in acting when she was at school, and then she went to Hollywood, and she did roles, and then she's gone. She's like, boop, out of there. Is she married? Is she got kids? Like, what's happening here? What happened to this actress? Usually, especially with even ones at this caliber with her background, we would find a Facebook page or something, a LinkedIn or something. But in our run of Spotlight, we've now got two actors who have just, after B5, disappeared. They're just gone. We don't know. And she's the other one. And it's like, again, kind of feels ironic because it's Lise. You know? That's it for the Wheel of Fire, a long discussion for a very big episode. An episode that's deceivingly huge, but again, it's the title. On a scale of Yum being bad and Yum Yum being good, what would you give this episode, Julio?
Oh, it's a Yum Yum.
Yum yum.
I give this episode a Yum Yum.
Yum yum.
I guess it's a Yum Yum.
Yum yum.
You sound so enthused, but don't worry, Rachel's enthusiasm will increase times 10 because she's going to tell us what we'll be talking about and watching next time on Babylon 5.
Episode 20, Objects in Motion. Jakar and Lita set out for new worlds, and Garibaldi departs with his favorite Martian, the Mars businesswoman he loves, after settling a score with the Red Planet's corporate leaders.
What an episode. So we'll be watching that next time.
We love Lise.
We love Lise.
We love Lise.
We love Lise. There's
Garibaldi loves Lise.
We all love Lise, and we have to wrap this up, but we will be talking about that, and in a couple of weeks we'll be doing the River of Souls. There was a little bit of a juggling of, do we do River of Souls now, because that's when it came out initially, but it's supposed to have come out after Objects at Rest, so we'll come back to the River of Souls soon. Now, we are done, we are dusted, we are finally getting out of here. Thank you all so much for listening, and Julio, thank you for coming back onto the podcast. The YouTube comments are screaming your name, saying thank you, Julio, thank you for standing up to those tyrants at Podcast.
Thank you for pissing off all Lita fans and all Lise fans and all Garibaldi and Season 5 fans.
Don't forget the Lockheads.
I mean, I do like Locke.
But you
Locke,
were like,
just,
her big scene is too long.
Yeah, I was like, I like her better when she's not showing off.
I like her better when she's not here.
No, thank you for having me. This was, as usual, a lot of fun, and it was a pleasure to discuss this episode with you too.
Where can people find you and the podcast?
We do not talk about Babylon 5 on our show, but
not yet.
I guess we always tease it. We might do one of the movies if I can convince Alex.
Do Legend of the Rangers, where it's the unsuccessul pilot for a series that never made it.
Is Garibaldi in it? If not, then what's the point? Okay, maybe then. You can look up the Contrarians on every podcatcher available, and you can find us as at Contrarian Prime on all the social media stuff. So that's it. There's episodes with Ryan. There's an episode with Rachel. We'll bring her back for something else.
Hear that, Rachel?
That's not sci-fi.
He's going to bring you back for something else.
That's not sci-fi.
That's not, unless you want it to be sci-fi.
Like, it took years for the first one to happen, so...
We'll take a few more again.
Yeah.
Julio needs a bit of a break from you breaking the system that is the definitive ratings made, and you convinced him to lower it. When you discussed Waitress, the Kerry Russell film classic, one of her only movies. Kerry Russell's a TV actress primarily, so one of the few leading Kerry Russell films Rachel was on the Contrarians to talk about, and I've been on there for a couple of movies. I talked about sci-fi classic Johnny Mnemonic with the boys. Nah, I'm kidding. I wasn't there for that. I recommended it to them, though. I inspired by saying, hey, you're doing Keanu Reeves movies. Where's this one?
No, you talked about sci-fi classic Nothing But Trouble.
Well,
that's...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely speculative.
It's very sci-fi in the Sylvester Stallone film Oscar to believe that Marissa Tomei is his daughter. But
Yes.
that is all we have. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on social medias as well, Yum Yum Podcast. Subscribe to us, follow us on Patreon. But until next time, remember, Jakar was busy playing with sand in this episode.
I thought it was rice.
No,
like I always think that it's rice, but it's sand. But it sounds like
do
rice.
either options make it better?
No, like...
Do you just sit solemnly in your quarters playing with a handful of sand in your sand bucket or your rice bucket?
No, I don't.
Julio does. That's what he gets up to during the Contrarians. If you want to hear Julio play with a bucket of sand...
Check out his ASMR YouTube channel.
Yeah. That's it. That's YouTube. The Contrarians YouTube channel is pretty wild, actually. They have lots of crazy things going on there.
Weirdly enough, it gets more unhinged than their OnlyFans.
Yeah, With Alex, the co-host of Contrarians, he has a WWE OnlyFans. Where...
Yeah, well, he declared that he loves cake. I just didn't think that he meant it in that way.
That's gross. But until next time, people, talking about cake, good eating to you.
Good eating to you.
Mr. Kelly.